Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Daily Word. Today's Monday, December 13th. Glad you could join me for our few minutes together as we continue our conversation about our daily Word. It's a beautiful Monday morning, sun shining through the sanctuary windows. And so glad you could join me in our time together. You see behind me, we've added poinsettias to our decorations, and they're beautiful this year. So thank you for being with us today. This Wednesday night is our third Advent Wednesday night. You're welcome to join us. 6 o'clock for dinner. We're going to have a pasta bar this week. So some pastas, some different kind of pasta sauces, I guess the word is, and breadsticks and salad and dessert. So hopefully you'll join us on Wednesday night. We're going to talk about Mary's visit to Elizabeth, and that when Mary was greeted by Elizabeth, John the Baptist leapt in his mother's womb at the presence of Jesus. We're going to talk about how that part of the ancestors of our faith help determine our lives. And then we'll continue to talk about our ancestors, of course. So hopefully you'll join us on this coming Wednesday night. And of course, Sunday night at 6 o'clock is our longest night Blue Christmas service. It's a time where we look at the celebration of this season a little bit differently, and knowing that sometimes because of death, because of fractured families, because of separations, divorce, folks find the season difficult. And so we talk about it differently. We light candles and we remember. So if you want to join us at 6 o'clock this coming Sunday night, we'll also have that available via Facebook Live, and you can join us for that as well. So the scripture for this morning is from Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah, is full of such powerful words for us and how we live our lives and knowing the presence of God in our lives. And in the season of Advent, this season of waiting and anticipation, waiting for God, if you will, and the incarnation of God into the world. I think about that in light of all of life's circumstances. We talked yesterday about the tornadoes that happened in various places in the country, especially those couple of towns in Kentucky. And we're reminded, that there are churches just completely wiped out in those towns, and how blessed we were to be able to come and worship in this place yesterday. And of course, for me to be here this morning. And so it's this gentle reminder that in the presence of our lives, God is always there. And so from Isaiah chapter 6, verse 3, we hear these words. And one called to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of God's glory. I think sometimes we get stuck in this trap or in this notion that we can keep God in a box. And, it's often probably more convenient for us and more gentle for us and easier for us to deal with if we keep God in a box. If we just keep God close where we need God to be, and then when we need God to rescue us or pull us out of the ditch, if you will, we can kind of let God out of the box. But otherwise, we are better when we do our own things sometimes. There's always this time of year, there is this constant conversation, if you will, about keeping Christ in Christmas. And, I think we think that makes us feel good when we say, keep Christ in Christmas. But I think when we say that, we don't really have any idea what we're saying when we say those words, keep Christ in Christmas. Because if that were the case, if we really took that seriously, we would know that God is everywhere, as Isaiah says to us, that the whole earth is full of God's glory. And there's nothing that we could possibly do to exclude God from the whole earth. And that God is going to be made manifest through Christmas, no matter what we do or how we think, or that we think somehow Christmas is being hijacked yet again. You know, friends, I have to tell you, Christmas being hijacked is just a political ploy, nothing else. Don't fall for that ridiculousness. So we live in these days, and we inch closer and closer to Christmas. And even in the midst of that, you know, in December we have tornadoes, which is a very strange thing. But if we're serious about who God is, and that Advent is about waiting and anticipating and knowing that God comes to us as a babe, lying in a manger, wrapped in swaddling clothes, if we like to reminisce about those words, if the whole earth is full of God's glory, there's no sweeping God out the door. If the whole earth is full of God's glory, then sometimes God's presence can be scary or can be frustrating, and at the very least could even be inconvenient for us. If the whole earth is full of God's glory, then in the midst of our lives, through these difficult, scary times, God is present with us. If the whole earth is full of God's glory, then God is present in the lives of people who are different than us. People who look different, people who act different, people who dress different, people whose lifestyle we may not understand or agree with. God is present with them as well. If the whole earth, you see, is full of God's glory, eventually we would grow up enough to know that the scary things of the world stop seeming to be so scary. The whole earth is full of God's glory as we believe it to be, then we can't put God in a box. We can't relegate God to something else. We don't get to decide where it is that God is. We have this difficulty, you know, we again fall for this political ploy that God's been taken out of schools and God's been taken out of sports and God's been taken out of, no, God hasn't. We don't have the power to do that. Don't fall for that stuff. Isaiah says the whole earth is full of God's glory. God is everywhere. God is omniscient. God is omnipresent. God is wherever God needs to be. The challenge is for us. It's a personal thing. It seems to me. If we believe that God is present with us, that we don't have to necessarily be in this space, that wherever we are, God is present with us, then we know that the whole earth is full of God's glory. The whole earth. No matter where people are, God's presence is there. And you know, I think that's good news for us in the midst of this Advent season. As we rush towards Christmas and all the things that begin to demand our attention, even more and even more and even more as we look at our calendars. I think it's good for us to know when we look around us. It's good for us to be reminded as we share our lives with each other. It's good for us to know when people all around us are different than us. And the debate rages on about who's welcome and who's not in certain places. The whole earth, Isaiah says, is full of God's glory. It would be good for us to let God out of the box that we try to keep God in. It would be good for us to know that God is coming in this season of Advent and Christmas, whether we fall for the notion that we have to somehow do something to keep Christ in Christmas. So Our word for us today, this idea that God is everywhere, I think is one that we need reminded of and place in our hearts and hold close to us. And know that through all of our lives, God is present with us. And if the earth is full of God's glory, we can't sweep God out the door. It's just not possible. And we should stop. We should stop. And we should just stop and be reminded that God's presence is everywhere with us, and not fall for these political things that are meant to get us all shook up. That's where God is in our lives, where Isaiah says God is. I hope this word is just a reminder for us that God is present with us in this season of Advent, no matter where we are, where we go, how big or how small our celebrations might be. I pray you'll know of this God who's full in the earth and God's glory that radiates around and through us. And know that no matter what is said by the talking heads, God can't be swept out anybody's door or any building's door or any institution's door. Know of God's love. Know of my love for all of you. And I'll see you tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Have a great day.